starts, right? Oops, sorry guys. I'll start over. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our February workshop, Cyanotypes and Sun Printing with Carol Estes and Annie Webster. The cyanotype is a photographic printing process that produces blueprints using coated paper and light. The process was discovered by the scientist and astronomer, I can't talk today, Sir John Herschel in 1842. Sun printing may refer to various printing techniques which use sunlight as a developing or fixative agent. Both of these processes can be done on a variety of material or objects from fiber to glass and more. So really happy that you're here with us today. And I'd just like to give a brief introduction to our speakers. Carol is a photographer by nature, and Annie is a fiber artist. Both of these artists are pushing the boundaries with their creations. This workshop may open a door you hadn't thought about, or may help nudge you to explore deeper into this exciting technique that has been around for ages, but is not frequently used in today's art. Carol and Annie will explain techniques, equipment, materials. List of sources and information will also be provided, and they come at it from very different perspectives. And we are looking forward to hearing this workshop. I do want to take a minute that if you want closed captioning turned on, to tell you how to do that. If you go to your More button at the bottom, usually on the right-hand side of your Zoom screen, the very last entry for me anyway is captions. Click on captions, then you can choose your language and then click show captions. So if you want to see what everybody's saying, it's not perfect, but it does pretty closely follow the conversation. Today, helping the speakers to try to manage the technology side is myself, Wanda, and Kim Carr. From time to time, things will be put in the chat. So if like the sources and what have you. So if you click on your More button again, or it might just show up on the bottom of your screen, depending on the view you're looking at, just click on chat and you'll be able to see the chat and what's there. And we'll try to point it out when things are put into chat to miss it. Our intent is to start with Annie, and then we'll go to Carol, and then we're going to open it up to a discussion and just talk about whatever this now intrigues you to ask questions about or try to understand additional ways it can be used. So this should be a fun topic. With that, Annie, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, let me see if I can figure out how to get my screen sharing going. Share. And now the people are in the way of my present button. And present. Ta-da! So I am a cyanotype experimenter. So that's kind of what we're going to talk about today. Cyanotypes are, like Wanda said, a really old photographic process. They were originally used to document botanical samples. You've probably seen flowers on blue backgrounds. And they were also a really early method of doing copies. That's where we get the term blueprints, because of the blue color. And that blue color comes from iron salts that are applied to a surface. I use fabric most often, but I also use paper. You can also use wood, leather, all sorts of things. We'll take the cyanotype solution. It will also stain a lot of things too. So don't wear a nice shirt if you're using the liquid solution, because you might splash and have a cyanotype shirt then. Once you coat your substrate in the solution, you expose it to light. I use the sun most often. You can also use a UV lamp, and that is what creates the beautiful blueprints. This is a cyanotype I did a few years ago. This is a cotton fabric on the background that I coated with the solution that I'll talk about here in a couple minutes. And then I used a doily that was one of my grandma's as the resist. And I put it out in the sun, let it turn blue, and then I've done a lot of stitching to highlight the resist areas, those areas in white. And it's a colorful doily, so I tried to match my stitching to the colors of the original doily in this piece. There are a number of ways you can get started. You can buy supplies already treated with the cyanotype solution, so you don't have to worry about mixing chemicals. You can get these sun print paper kits. I found these on Amazon. And you might have done those in school too when you were a kid. That's a good sciencey project and art project for a lot of classes. They also have, Jacquard makes a pre-treated cyanotype fabric that works really well. I find the weave on it is pretty tight, and I am usually going to stitch on my cyanotypes. So it's not super comfortable for me to stitch on, so I don't use it very often, but it is available for you to use. And then you can buy the kit that has the 2 salts that you need, and you can make your own solution, so you can apply the solution to whatever you want to and not be limited to this specific type of paper or this specific type of fabric. But just to show you, this is that cyanotype fabric. I bought mine, it's like a 5 by 7 foot mural sized, which is kind of fun, but I cut it down into pieces that I could use. And this is a crocheted dress that was my mom's when she was a baby, because she was a fancy baby and had a nice little crocheted dress. And I like that it's kind of a ghosty skeleton of a dress there. I think that's kind of fun. But again, it's a pretty tough fabric to stitch into. So this is more of a memory of the dress and not something that I'm going to do a lot of sewing on. These are the chemicals that I'm using. They're from Jacquard. The potassium ferricyanide and the ferric ammonium citrate. You use much more of this ferric ammonium citrate in the solution compared to this potassium ferricyanide, and that's why this one is much bigger than this one. If you buy that kit that comes with the 2 salts in the bottles already, which I recommend, especially for your first time out, it has pre-measured amounts of both chemicals, and you just add water to those bottles. And I also recommend keeping those bottles, because all of these salts and then the solutions are light sensitive, and these black containers keep the chemicals from being exposed to light. So if you hold on to these, then you can, next time, if you buy your chemicals separately, you can mix them in these containers, and they're very convenient. I did not do that the first time I bought one of these, so I'm using like a fish oil canister and a Cool Whip container, which isn't completely light tight, but then I store it in a box to keep the light from getting to it. But yeah, if you go this route, make sure you keep those bottles.
Hey,
And
Annie.
because if you get that set, yes.
I'm sorry. Patty had a question like, what kind of safety issues are there with using these chemicals? Do you have to wear a mask or gloves or, you know?
I don't find them to be caustic. They're fairly safe. But with anything like this, use your own set of safety precautions. If you feel more comfortable with a mask, certainly do that. Especially when you're using them from the larger containers, you are going to have those crystals out. They're fairly large. They're not like with a dye powder or something like that, where they're very fine and easier to inhale. These are more like a table salt consistency. Like you can see here, this potassium ferricyanide, it's a red crystal that is, yeah, it's like salt sized. And then the ferric ammonium citrate is a little finer, and it's yellow. but they're not as fine as some of those other things that we might use in dyeing processes or treating fabrics to get ready for dye. But it will stain your hands. I mean, I've got some blue under my fingernails now from doing this last week. So you can wear gloves if you're more comfortable with that. I don't mind having stained hands. It's kind of a way of life. So yeah, do what you feel comfortable with, but I am completely comfortable using them on their own. So you're going to take those two chemicals, if you buy them in their powdered form, and you're going to add them to water to make a solution. So you can apply it to whatever substrate you're using. And there we go. Mix the chemicals with water. There should be instructions on whatever chemicals you buy. But for me, the ferric ammonium citrate was 100 grams in 402 milliliters of water. And the potassium ferrocyanide was 40 grams in 402 milliliters of water. And the important thing you need to remember when you're mixing these is that they need 24 hours to dissolve before you use them. I've done it a few times where I don't already have solutions mixed up. I'm like, I'm going to do cyanotypes today. And like, oh, right, I have to wait until these are all dissolved. So make sure you're thinking ahead when you want to do this. They do have a long shelf life when they're in their separate solutions. So you can keep them for a while after you've mixed them up in their separate solutions. To make the cyanotype, you're going to mix them together. That doesn't have as long of a shelf life, but keeping them separate, you can keep them for a while. And they are light sensitive. So keep them in those black bottles or keep them in a dark box or a dark room where they aren't going to be exposed to light for a long time. So then to make your cyanotype, you're going to mix equal parts of your FAC and your PF solutions. And they are light sensitive and they have a short shelf life today. So just mix what you need for that particular session of cyanotyping. You're going to brush or otherwise apply the mixture to whatever you're going to make your print on. Then you're going to place your objects on top, your negatives, whatever, and you're going to secure it. And then you're going to expose that to light until it turns blue. And then you're going to rinse it out. That is the quick version of how you make a cyanotype. I will admit that once I get those initial solutions mixed up, I'm pretty sloppy with this process. A lot of things I'm pretty exact about in my art, but this is not one of them. I just want some instant gratification. So a lot of times, actually probably most times, you will apply your cyanotype mixture to your fabric, to your paper, and then you'll let it dry to get a really clear print. I do it wet because I don't have that kind of patience. The exception to that is if I am trying to get an image of something that I care about, like that doily that I showed you earlier. I didn't want to get any of that solution transferring onto the doily because I did not want that doily turning blue. So I let that fabric dry. Otherwise, I use a lot of flowers and, rubber bands, nuts and bolts types things, and they will rinse off or just go in the trash. So it doesn't matter to me if they get the solution on them. Here I have several samples of fabric. I was just kind of experimenting with what fabrics take the mixture well and what ones don't. There's some wool here, a couple different kinds of silk, a velvet, and the thin, my mind's going blank. I want to say gossamer, but that's not the right word. I'll think of it eventually. It's thin, it's pretty. So I've put those on the, this is just like a piece of plywood, like you get at the craft store. And And here I tape them down. Once the board is kind of wet with solution, the fabric adheres to it a little better, but it was kind of flopping around. So I've taped them down for this example. And then I've taken a bunch of kind of dead stuff from our yard and put them on top of these little fabrics. Then I've used, this is a piece of glass from a picture frame, and I've just taped around the edges of it with painter's tape in case there's any sharp pricklies so I don't hurt myself. And I've clamped it down on this edge. I would usually clamp it down all the way around, but my binder clips have walked off. So I've used a little bit of painter tape on this side. It's not holding it down that well. Packing tape probably would have been a better choice as a substitute there. Because you can see that there's some shadows here. That means the sun is kind of getting under. So I'm not going to get a super clear print here. So anywhere the sun hits it, it's going to become blue. And this, I just set this out in the sun on a bright day and turned around and picked up the phone. And you can already see that the process is starting. Like there's a lot of green over here. And this is kind of turning into that neon greeny color from that bright yellow. And this is 10, 20 minutes later. Again, sloppy with this. I just set it outside and forget about it and then come back later and go, ooh, look at that. You can see there's
And
still
you got a question.
Sure.
When you are applying the solution, does that part need to be done in a dark room avoiding light?
Very good question. I don't go into a dark room for it. I did that in my kitchen and the blinds were open, but I was working fairly quickly. It's light sensitive, but I haven't found it to be as light sensitive as like a developing a photograph kind of thing. So not super dark, not super light. Don't be slow. But yeah, I think they turn out fine just having the natural light in the kitchen and working quickly. You can see there's still a few areas that haven't turned blue, so I let this sit outside for a little while longer. And then I brought it inside and you can see how dark this has turned. And these areas that are yellow, this is the original color of that cyanotype mixture on the fabric. And this is still sensitive to light. So if I took my plant material off and then stuck this back outside, I would lose all of this. Like it would all turn into that dark blue color and I'd have a bunch of lovely dark blue fabric, but that's not really what I want. So rinse these pretty quickly. And I just use the bathroom sink because it's white and I can see what is running off from the fabric. And I rinse them until the water runs clear and then dry them. And this is what I got. This is a wool felt and it did not take the cyanotype mixture well at all. This is actually, I ran it through another time with some other stuff on top and it just, wool felt was a bust for me. This is that golden Alexander that wasn't completely smashed down. And you can see there is some image coming through, but it's more blue than not. This is the velvet, and this is another one where, you know, velvet has that pile. So it's weird how the cyanotype liquid went into it. I don't know if maybe soaking it instead of brushing it on would have made it a, you know, a more consistent blue in the background. I might experiment with that a little bit more. This was just a basic cotton, and you can see the little petals from the flower. And this is gossamer is the word. I knew I would come up with it for this fabric. And and it's just a very thin see-through. And this is the one I was most excited about, because I think there's a lot of potential for layering pieces of this, and it's kind of seeing the shadows and bring them all together in different layers. I think that could be really cool. Doing them wet, I think, gives you kind of that ethereal, dreamy quality. It's not super crisp. Sometimes you want that, absolutely. But I kind of like the vague, ooh, mystery of a leaf kind of look. This is a piece that I worked on in a class last year, and it includes several cyanotypes. This is a violet leaf up here in the right, that looks like a little heart, so I loved it. The pink here in the middle is a cyanotype on pink fabric. You don't have to use white for your backgrounds. This is, I think it was like a batik thing from Joanne, and I used rubber bands for my resist on this. And then down here in the left corner is another with the strawberry leaves, and I've done a bunch of seed stitch around it. And then over here, the Amish sugar cookies is just a scrap off the edge of a cyanotype. I just needed a little bit of fabric to bridge the gap between these two areas, and that blue, I mean, it's a nice blue, so I'm happy with that. And I think that does it for me. And we can talk with Carol now. If I can figure out how to unshare. Oh, stop share. There it is. Yay.
That was nice. I bet you're going to have a lot of questions, Annie. Good job.
Probably. Thank you.
Oh my gosh, that was so much fun. She set up a whole lot of things, and now I'm going to do like the totally different things. So, because I'm basically a photographer and I'm going in, she showed you what they call the wet cyano process. And so what I'm doing is the standard, just the regular dry process, and I'm going to be doing a video, and I'm using all pre-coated paper so that you all know where you can just walk right in and start this without any major issues. So let me see if I can figure out, get my screen share here. Can you see my screen?
No, ma'am.
Not yet.
Not yet.
All right.
Yeah, those pieces you shared, Annie, just gorgeous. It was really neat to see the
Thank you.
Good job.
See it now?
Now we can see it.
Yeah.
I was trying the
Yes.
wrong. Okay. All right. So I did a full video. So and the video is called Cyano Basics, the rules as I make them up. So here we go. Hi, I'm Carol Estes, and I'm a juried member of the Best Missouri Hands in the field of photography. I picked up a camera when I was 53 years old, had to teach myself photography, and so here I am into a whole new world, I guess you could say. A lot of people call this like sun printing, and it started outdoors because it was invented just in the early 1800s, just after the camera was invented itself. And of course, there was no electricity. So in order to have exposure, which you have to have light to expose the chemicals, the sun provided the only option of any magnitude. Now, with UV light and other types of light, we have the ability to bring it indoors. So I use a piece of glass on the bottom, put my items on, and you go to the exposure, and then I put another piece of glass on top to make sure that you have a good contact, because it is a contact print. Everything is 1-to-1. Whatever the size of your negative, whatever size of your paper is, that is the size of your cyanotype. This paper comes from the Cyanotype store. It's the Cyanotype store. They sell ready-to-made paper in all different sizes. A lot of exposure time runs probably about 8 to 10 minutes or so, depending on what you're doing. The paper already has the chemicals on it, so we're already out in the light. It's already started to be affected, so you have to work kind of quickly. I'm going to put these pressed flowers down. They have to go down onto the glass. I'm not going to worry too much about composition today. I started out with just a couple pieces of glass and to weight things down, but I love the snap frame. I arrange this in the middle, and then I bring this down over the top, flip my light on, and then a lot of times I'll look down to make sure that everything's centered, so I have the exposure in the brightest points of the area. So let's do 8 minutes, and I'll see you back in my kitchen. All right, welcome to the big reveal. Here's the kitchen. There is basically just a couple parts. You need your product, and you need your paper, you need exposure time, then you rinse it. As you can see, I have this high-tech clothesline. All cyanotypes need to be rinsed in water, and they need to hang dry, because if they lay down flat, they can get some water pooling, and there may be some little bit of chemicals still in the paper that may not get, and they'll pool and they'll discolor your print. This is how it will come out of the exposure. And this one has vinegar and water in it. This one has hydrogen peroxide and water. All right, here we go with peroxide. And also, a lot of times I'll take watercolor pencils and add a little extra oomph to them. So we'll see how it goes. Okay, now go play. And thanks a lot. It's magic.
Thank you, Annie and Carol. Appreciate it. And at this point, unmute yourselves as you have questions or want to discuss things you want to do with Cyanotype.
I have all kinds of questions.
Yay!
Carol, I couldn't read some of the stuff that you had in the video. It went too fast for my reading speed.
But it's going to be on the YouTube channel, so you'll be able to go back and stop it to do. And I can also send you a link to it. But I wanted to keep my best friend said the same thing, but I wanted to keep it short enough that it did drive everybody crazy, and people go back and reread and put a pause on to read some of the things. So
great, I will do that.
Right.
But the light, is that something that you made?
Yep, I built it. I don't know. It's the top of a shipping crate that I had in my garage. And I was trying to figure out what to do, because there's a lot of people who just take square, like UV big black lights and squares, and they'll put cut a hole in a box and just have it, and then just work inside of a box with this light going down. But I wanted to be able to be flexible, and so I went the option of the strip light. So I just attached them, separating them using that, and that's how, and I can lift it up and down to do, and I have the ability to work up to 16 by 20 if I want.
Perfect.
So I was hoping I could grow into it.
That's a really slick setup you've got.
Yeah,
I like it. Yeah.
That's great. Good, good.
Well, I live in an area where I just like she said, I'm impatient, and at 10 o'clock at night, I may just want to go play. And so doing it indoors, I can play anytime. And without shadows and light, because I thought her section was so amazing about outdoors, and the fact, the shadows and things to do that you have to work with, and the direction of light is extremely important as a photographer. But with natural products, it's not so it's to taste. But with the negative, it has to be directly over, or you ruin all of your focus off of your negative.
Right. And in this time of year, it's hard to get directly overhead. It's, you know, sitting over here.
I had a question about, I noticed you both used glass sheets in your process. Is the purpose of that just to hold all the pieces down so there's no movement in it, or is there something more to the glass?
Go ahead, Annie.
For me, that is the purpose of it. I've also used plexiglass for that. The plexi that I have has like a anti-shine coating on it, which makes it not as great, I think, for this kind of thing. It makes it a little fuzzy, the resulting cyanotypes. So I like the glass better, but that's just because that's the...
And the tightness of the contact is going to increase the detail in your botanicals. So, right. So that's why she had some that had the ethereal look, because she had that raised up a little bit. If you go in and you totally weight all those down, that's why the Queen Anne's lace, you get all that detail because it's tight as a drum. So it's all to taste.
Yep.
And desirability, right?
Yep.
But necessary as a photographer. So.
Yeah, and I've definitely like doing bigger pieces where maybe the fabric goes out past where my plexi goes, the wind will flop the edges over onto it, and that, I mean, it makes kind of a cool thing, but that flopped over fabric is now creating a shadow on the print. So I've got slightly different coloration in some areas because the fabric's folded over the edge of the plexi when the wind blows. Yeah, and generally the wind blowing all of your stuff away is bad because then there's nothing to print. I might have done that before.
I have read that you can also rinse after you do the initial water, that you can use other things like turmeric and baking soda and other things to get different looks. Have you guys done any of that?
Yeah, that's required in the wet process. You can't do it in the dry process because the turmeric, it has to be a chemical reaction during the exposure. So you can do the paper, dry it, and then I understand there are people who can come in and then you can spray vinegar and you put things down. But the paper cyanotype chemicals have to be somewhat damp so they can react to the turmeric and stuff. Otherwise, it just sets on like and you salt and stuff. But in order for them to affect your image, there has to be a chemical reaction. And
Yeah,
so once your paper's dry, you can't have those
it's
things.
just like a blob of stuff on top.
Okay.
I mean, it makes
but,
a cool effect. This was wet paper. It was wet from the cyanotype solution, and I sprinkled the turmeric on it, and it kind of makes that powdery galaxy look behind there. And you can't really see, I can see it better in person, but there's a little bit of color from the turmeric that came through, but not a ton.
And this is soap bubbles in the background.
Mm-hmm.
And I did a soap bubbles. I used dry paper, but I activated things with soap bubbles. And but the thing about adding things is that you never know what you're going to get. It could be all or bust. It's just a random thing depending on everything. So that's what's so nice about it, because you just don't know.
Yeah, like this one is rubber bands, and I sprayed it with vinegar before I exposed it. So there's areas where the solution kind of washed away and it's really light in there, but it's given me some speckling, which is kind of cool. And then this one had my soap didn't come out of my sprayer as well as I thought it would, but it kind of just muddied it up a little bit, but you can kind of see some splotchy spots in there.
I like micro misters because sometimes the spray can be kind of, can really kind of throw way too much down. You can't take it out. You can always spritz a little bit more, but you can never remove it if it all of a sudden your sprayer just goes whoosh and just throws too much down.
Yeah, and I tried it directly from the Dawn Power Wash thing, and it just kind of went. So that kind of made a mess, but that's okay. It still turned out kind of cool.
So when you're using vinegar,
one of a kind.
Yes.
Are you guys using, what's the concentration of vinegar to water?
I put that, I think I put that in as a thing. Let me go get it. Let me go get the bottle. I wrote it on top of the bottle of both the peroxide and the vinegar.
So when I did my spray, I have a bottle of vinegar just in a spray bottle for cleaning things in my studio, and that's just 100% straight vinegar that I
Just
sprayed
straight
onto it.
vinegar.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
And it's white vinegar, not like apple
yes,
cider. Okay.
yeah. But I mean, cider vinegar is also acidic. It would do, I think it
Yeah,
would
it
do
might be
similar
interesting.
things, and it might smell a little better than just white vinegar. And I don't know if the color in it would transfer or not. I mean, that would be an interesting thing to try. Or balsamic vinegar. I don't know.
Ooh, that would smell good.
It would smell good.
Annie,
I
I
have to try
love
that.
the rubber bands. The rubber bands look
Aren't they
so
fun?
cool.
I love them too. They're
I'm
just,
like, I gotta try that on my gel press.
yep, you do. You
Ooh.
do.
See, peroxide is 1 tablespoon peroxide for 1/3 of a cup of water. And it's just the peroxide is amazing. As soon as I pull it out of the water, I'll just stop, and a lot of times I'll spray it and hold it. But this time I just did it laying down for the video. It was easier to show. Vinegar is 1 teaspoon, and I think I just whatever, I think it was white vinegar, preferably white vinegar, not cider vinegar, because it has a little bit of a color to it. 1 teaspoon vinegar to 1/2 cup of water. I had to write it down because I knew I'd never remember.
So
I'll put that down.
so the vinegar spray or the hydrogen peroxide and stuff is applied after it's gone through the other chemical process. So this is just an additional effect to
It's done immediately after rinsing.
Okay.
Yeah, you expose, and then you rinse all the chemicals out. Once the chemicals are washed out, you just take it and do whatever option you want. For a photographer, the vinegar brings out midtones in a cyanotype, which is kind of not irrelevant for fabric and stuff if you want to do, because you're doing a whole lot more in fabric. But it does bring out midtones for details in the negatives, from the negatives. And then the peroxide is just, I call it magic, because when I do a program, it says for kids, I'll just stand up there and just do this right in front of them, like their jaw drops, because right, it just it's amazing. So I generally I don't always do it, but I don't always use vinegar, but I almost always use peroxide on mine.
I think my jaw dropped too when you sprayed that on. That's not
Yeah.
just kids that happens with.
Yeah, that's why I always preface at the magic time, because people do not know what to expect, and it's just crazy cool. But that has to be, it won't work any other time except once all of the chemicals have been released. And if you want to come back, there was a couple of things I had dark brown in the center, and that is called, there's all sorts of things you use to retone, that you could take the blue out and stuff. And I hand painted in a coffee and water mixture into those angels, and that was done. And so that's called toning, and I actually use coffee with it. I now have some catnip that I just did because somebody asked me if anybody had ever toned with catnip, and I said I just happen to have some. So I boiled it up yesterday. So now I'm going to experiment with that. There's a coffee, black tea, green tea, tannic acid. It's just amazing the chemicals you can use that make changes. And there's lots of YouTubes out there showing what you can do.
Mhm.
Carol, I love that piece of the bird nest with the toned eggs. That's beautiful. I love
That was
that
the coffee.
piece.
Yeah, that's the
That was
coffee.
coffee.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And that was the first time I had actually I mixed up a little coffee, and I kept walking around with my paintbrush. Oh, let me paint this in. Let me paint it here. Oh, let me paint this in here. And so it's nice because I do have a show coming up this weekend, and I actually have one of those, exactly one with and without the toned eggs. So
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
to see people's reactions of each of them. So, but That's what's so exciting. You think outside the box and just run with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, it's like, what can I lay on top of a piece of fabric and see what it looks like when it's done? And even, while it's been warm here, it is still the dead of winter, and I was still able to find things in the garden that I could put on the fabric. And the dead stuff makes some really cool images. It doesn't have to be blooming beautifully to make cool things.
I would say this piece actually, one of the other things you could do is that this is actually from a 1940 a celluloid negative. It was from an old camera. And I just happened to have, as old from my previous life, all of these old negatives. And the negative is exactly this size. That's it. And I laid it down, and it's very small. This is a 5x7 total. And so it's just 1-to-1. And so you could actually do a cyanotype, and instead of a new digital negative, this is the old negative. And there was a lady with the long dress and the hat. She was actually a 1910 glass negative. And so that's an experiment because they're thicker and they're a little harder to deal with. But what you can put on it is only limited by what you're brave enough to try.
Hey, Annie.
Can you reuse negatives, Carol?
Say that one more time.
Can you reuse negatives? Like once you use it for a cyanotype, do you need to make a new negative?
There's two processes. There's the dry cyanotype, which means that this pre-coated paper is dry. So the negative sets directly on top of the paper, and then you put the weight on top of it and expose it. Your negative is fine. For what she does, she uses a wet solution, and you can't have any distance between the paper and the negative at all. So if you can't, it's almost like a one-time only. And at the minute your negative gets wet, you have all this blobby loss stuff in there. It won't. Negatives do not survive under the wet process, or really.
But the dry, you can.
90% of my work to do with negatives, almost 100% has to be the dry process, because I'm using negatives and I want to be able to use them again.
Great, thank you.
And they're created in Photoshop, or you have to make a black and white on this special film and print them. They have to be printed out on a special film, and it has to have great contrast, black and white, inverted, and flipped like this, because if you have text or anything that reads in the background, if you do, it's going to be backwards. So you have to invert and flip your image, so that, and especially if you want, like I have the lady from the Nelson Atkins Museum, the statue. I want her arm goes this direction, so I had to flip it, so when I lay it down and I pick it up, her arm is still going that direction, type of thing. But anyway, so, and that's one of the drawbacks, or the extra work you create the negatives to do. But you could buy the transparent film and that are designed for most printers. I print on a roll. I have a roll of it, and on a big photo printer, so I have it. But I just ordered some sheets. I haven't tried it with the regular printer, so that's my next step, to try the transparent sheets on my other printer and see how it works.
Hey, Annie. I have a question.
Yes.
You showed like the chemicals, the crystal or whatever. And one was like a reddish color and one was like a yellowish color.
Yeah.
So explain to me, how do red and yellow to me make orange? So how do you get blue? I don't.
Chemistry is the answer to that. And I flunked out of dental school on chemistry, so that yeah, I mean, it's part of it is the magic of the sun or UV lights reacting with those things, that it's not a straight yellow and red make orange. There's the extra component of the UV light coming in and reacting with those things to turn it blue. I don't know that I can get any more technical than that because I don't know the answer. But yeah, I mean, light, when you add light into the color spectrum, it makes colors not mix the same way, if that makes any sense.
Okay.
Like when you work with printing, you do the CMYK, the cyan, the magenta, the yellow, and the black are the main colors that you use. But when you're doing things on screen, your colors are in the RGB space, which are red, green, and blue, because the light from monitors and screens, it's a completely different color spectrum. So you're kind of mixing what you see in those salts with the light, and it just makes everything explode into blue. Someone on YouTube is going to watch that and go, what are you talking about?
Well, what it makes me think about is if you go into a lab and you put all this stuff on your petri dishes and then you expose it to UV light, you may get all kinds of different colors that I can't think of the word that it's called, but yeah, you just may see all kinds of different things, and not necessarily just blue, but purples and reds and yellows and stuff. So
I use
Right.
Mother Nature made it.
Exactly.
I use the liquid product already instead of the crystals. I use a pre-liquid because it's instantaneous. I can like work within hours, and those all pour out brown.
Mhm.
So when they
Yes,
make them
that's
and make
true.
it up and put them in the black bottles, when you pour them together, they're brown, just brown things and liquids that go in, and it's dark, dark, dark. Has so you start with, you look at those chemical sheds separately, but then the liquids that you would buy from the online, they'll come all brown. So
And when you
that's
put them on your paper, they're yellow.
Mhm.
right, the chemicals, but after when they mix them at the manufacturer and they send them to you in the bottles, when you pour the 1-to-1 into to make your thing, both those liquids are brown.
Right.
So right, so then you have a whole different thing. So if you order the chemicals, don't be surprised if you don't see any color, because they come just yeah,
Right.
dark and ready to pour.
And
Dark and ready to pour.
Right.
and I saw that.
So I have another.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and I saw that you guys have put a couple links on where to purchase stuff in the chat and stuff. And I will save the chat and I'll send that to everybody so you'll have the links.
Great.
So I had another question. Carol, you mentioned using the transparencies. So I've been playing with a process of printing onto a transparency and then transferring that onto a watercolor paper using an alcohol-based kind of solvent solution. And so, and it takes most of it off of the transparency. So I guess my question would be, is if you were creating the negatives and putting it on the paper, it's that same process then, right?
Right. Whatever you're doing to create your digital negative for any kind of thing, my process is you just take that negative, lay it onto the dried prep, because they recommended that the chemicals stay 2 to 24 hours overnight, but you can use some of it in a couple hours with digital negatives a bit. And but that digital negative, it comes right out of the printer, and I don't alter it out of the printer. I may do a test print and find out that it's kind of muddy and I don't have a lot of the proper contrast and highs and lows and light. I may have to go in and tweak my, as somebody else asking me, I said, I've sometimes have to redo my negative 3 times in order to get it correct. Because you don't, just like anything, you don't know until you print a photo whether or not it's what you want. Same thing with the negative for the cyanotype. You can kind of guess where your highlights and lights and darks are, because whatever is dark on your negative is going to be light on the cyanotype. So you have to remember, that's why a lot of mine right now have the blue around them, because I don't go in and remove all that outside, which is what I'm going to go back and learn, is to create a very dark area all the way around my negative, so that all I have is just an image in between. So I have just like a portrait in the center, and that's part of making of covering your outside. You have to mask it with something so it's not blue.
Right.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I just hadn't done the negatives on the transparencies. These are just taking, I convert the image to a black and white and then print it and then transfer it. I'm still playing with that. Okay.
Okay, Kara, can you clarify something? Because this, I don't quite get the like film process, I guess. So the negatives you're using, is it like, I'm imagining, because when I think about the printing process, I think about how Annie does it, where you're using items, you know, just so, but when you're doing the negative, is it transparent that you're putting down, or is it like a white sheet of paper and
No,
using black? Okay, so
it's yeah, it's called a film positive, and it's a clear, transparent sheet. And the only thing that gets printed is whatever is black.
Is the negative space.
Right. It's like a printer never prints white. A photograph, a printer never prints white. So when you,
because that's what's the clear basically would be.
So in it, only the black will print. And the black on the negative is the white on the cyanotype, because that black masks the chemical light and the
light coming through.
Right. So nothing can go through the dark. So whatever is the dark is your image, and everything else is blue. Depending on how far out you paint, you can a lot of times people will just paint just a section of their paper, and then the rest of it'll be white, you know, around the edges. They can see the brush strokes. It was kind of really cool, the natural with the brush strokes. And but for this, what I use is the pre-coated paper all the way to the edge, because I thought it was easier for the demonstration to be to have the simple, because both of us are still experimenting and learning and playing really hard with this. And but the negatives can be a little difficult to do, and it took me a long time to figure it out. But the more detail you have in your process, the more detail you'll have in your finished product. Because that's the thing, leaves, they call them like ghost leaves, you know, where the leaves have just eaten out most of that kind of stuff. It'll give you
just the skeleton of the veins
look, but just a full leaf will be a blob. So that's the difference, even in the digital negatives, where you want tons of detail and not a whole lot of dark, so that you have lots of crazy detail and contrast.
But I love this. This has been such a great presentation, because it's so, I mean, this is going to be the next thing I'm diving into for sure. But I love that it's like you both are using the same process, 2 totally different, unique ways. And it is like, I mean, I'm just beaming. Like, I'm so excited to play around with this. Thank you.
You're so welcome.
Yay.
I just put a question into the chat. When you're doing this on paper, if you do it wet versus doing dry, which do you get greater detail?
It depends
Assuming
on
everything is flat.
It depends on your object, because large objects are not going to have a lot of detail. And one of let's see, and this one right here, it's right here, there's chain. And I'll put clear, you can see the detail of the chain. This was a wet process where I used the vinegar and stuff on top of the paper. So, but the more detailed the item that you're using, the better detail you're going to have in the end. So it has to do with not really the wet or dry, but it has to do with the items you're using.
Okay, so it doesn't matter if it's wet or dry, it's just the item.
It's basic. The basic part is the item, the items you're using, and what like she loves that ethereal. She is not as detail oriented as I am. You'll be a little more detail oriented in it. However, you love the abstract as well, so you may find a happy medium between these two. Yeah. So it's just go in and play, and that's why at the end I said just go play, because you don't know what's going to click with you until you play. And the pre-coated paper is economical enough that you go in and just experiment to do. It's already there. I order 5x7 packages of 5x7, and if I have something new and a new idea, I just go in and play with it and just throw it in, and it's easy. All I need is a little thing to rinse the water and hang it to dry, and then I can find out what kind of results I'm going to get. Because the coating the chemicals is more expensive and time oriented, and you can do it like that with a pre-coated paper.
Yeah, I already have the solution, so that's
right.
That works. Okay.
Right. But if you're testing your negative stuff, I highly recommend trying the pre-coated paper to test your negatives in the beginning, because you don't want to waste the chemicals, and you need a high caliber paper in order to have a good cyanotype with photography and the chemicals. So I use like 180-pound watercolor paper. So that's expensive. But if you can test negative on a 63-cent sheet of pre-coated paper, you could go and find out what you did right or wrong with your negatives. Because for me, it's all in the negative.
Okay.
All right. Hey,
If that makes sense.
this has been super informative, and we are up on our, well, we can go however long, but I don't want to keep everybody all day. But I wanted to see if Pat or Laura or Lori have questions, because you ladies have been sitting in on this too, and so wanted to see if you've got questions for Carol or Annie. Laura, you're muted. You'll need to unmute, Laura.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to know if you were going to do this on leather. Do you do it on like the tan side, or like if you're putting the chemicals on there, does that take away from the leather? Or have you ever experimented with leather?
It would,
I haven't done a lot.
and it would need to be on the absorbable side. That whatever product you're using, it has to absorb the chemicals.
Okay.
So, right. So one side of leather may be treated enough and sealed that it will not take the product. So it has to, and that's why the fabric has to be silk, cotton, linen, that type of thing, because polyester will not absorb the chemicals.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
But go play and try it.
Right.
And let us know. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, Annie and Carol.
You're welcome.
Did you have a question, Lori?
Oh, thank you, Annie and Carol.
No, I don't have any questions. I'm gonna have to rewatch.
Okay, all right. Pat, you have any
I'm gonna
questions?
rewatch everything.
All right.
I put the link to the video so you can go back and stop and start read all my little titles. Stuff through it.
Okay, sounds good.
Well, and the excellent thing about this
I'll-
is, whoops, I'm sorry, Carol. I was just gonna say the excellent thing about this
no,
is
no, no. I would say
that Carol and Annie are both the, Best Missouri Hands members. So feel free to reach out to them with your questions and stuff. Obviously they're excited about this and they've been playing with it, and we'll be happy to probably help you with any questions you have. So don't hesitate after this is over, you want to follow through and stuff, go ahead and reach out to them.
Absolutely.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
it was
you.
so much fun.
Yay.
Good job, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was great.
Annie did great for to open up and start the whole process. So I was so happy to follow her.
Yay. We did it in the right order.
That's right.
It was very
Well,
interesting.
thank you very
So-
much, everyone, for being here.
Yep, and we'll have another workshop next month. I don't think we've settled on a title yet, but we do have several professional development workshops planned for this year, including how to host put on your own home show or an open studio. We've got folks that have done that for years that'll be on the panel. How to publish a book. I just published a book. I know we've got a couple other folks in our group that have published books or are thinking about it. The one on the history of Best Missouri Hands. I mean, we've just got a wealth of knowledge in our group and stuff that we want to share with you guys. So thank you for joining us today. Wanda, you want to add anything in there?
The only thing, it might be good to just mention that our annual meeting will be in person in April 13th in Columbia. And our guest speaker is AI, Don't Get Left Behind. Very timely topic. Should be very interesting for all of us to
Yes.
hear.
We'll
you'll
open
be more
registration for
about
that.
that.
Yes, we'll open registration for that on March 1st.
Yes.
Online on the website, but we will post lots about it on the Facebook page. So, and we'll get emails to you. You shouldn't miss information about that one.
Have a wonderful rest of your week.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.